Can Nottingham Forest make the Champions League? Yeah, you heard that right. We are back and Forest are on the cusp of European football. The question is, can they do it and how? Find out in just a moment's time. Well, first of all, let's start off with the league table. Now, I'm going to try and put it there. The league table at the moment is, let's just say, rocky. Nottingham Forest, Aston Villa, Chelsea, Man City, Newcastle, all trying to get into the top 4 or 5 and get Champions League football. If you like, it is probably the best football that you can get when it comes to European football, of course. But let's talk about the different scenarios that could happen here. Now, Forest, of course, I think they need to win at least another 3 games to get the Champions League football that they want. Man City, of course, they come off a really good win against Aston Villa. Chelsea, not necessarily doing so great, but they've still got enough quality, especially at this end of the season, to pick up points and potentially cause some problems for Forest. Newcastle, they come off a really heavy defeat to Aston Villa, so they'll have a point to prove going forward. So every team at the moment that is trying to make Champions League football is a really tough competitor for Nottingham Forest. Now, without going too far into all the different sort of permutations, because we could be here all day, let's talk about how Nottingham Forest can get the Champions League and who could be crucial for them in these next coming fixtures. So, having a look at the fixtures, I'll pop them up just here. Nottingham Forest still have to play, bar Wembley of course, on Sunday at the time of recording in the semi-finals of the FA Cup. They've got to play Brentford, Crystal Palace, Leicester, West Ham and Chelsea. Now, the most common thing said is that's the easiest run of any other Champions League team, and it's true, it is, in terms of if you look at it on paper. There's no easy game in the Premier League. I hate to be cliche and say it, but there is always going to be tough parts to this run. Leicester are down. They're going to want to try and ruin Forest's Champions League dream. West Ham want to get something before the end of the season to at least give Graham Potter some hope going into the summer. Brentford, they haven't really got anything to play for, but obviously whenever they play Forest, it's always a bit of a tough one. Now, of course, we are playing them at the City Ground, so that is a different thing altogether. And as for Crystal Palace, I think there's a good chance that Forest beat them, I'll be honest. But if Forest got 3 wins there, at least 3 wins, potentially even 4 wins, I think that seals Champions League football. Now, of course, Forest form hasn't been so great lately. But why is that? I'm going to talk about it now. Injuries, some tactical reasons, and much more. So let me know what you think, by the way, why Forest maybe haven't been in such great form. And also let me know before the end of the video if you think Forest will get Champions League football. But here's why I think Forest haven't been in the greatest form and how they will turn it around and get Champions League football this year. So perhaps the biggest injury for Nottingham Forest has been, in my opinion, Chris Wood. Having Chris Wood out is a massive, massive loss because he's the output. He's the focal point of this team, and when he's not in the team, it gives Nuno a bit of a tactical headache. Who does he play instead? Because albeit Elanga has been coming in as kind of an auxiliary striker, kind of running between the wings and making up sort of 2 strikers at times, and also pressing with Chris Wood out of possession in that sort of 4-4-2 that Forest have out of possession. I don't think that really Forest at the moment have someone who can come on for Chris Wood and offer what he does, which is a concern. And of course, Taiwo Awoniyi, a great guy and someone that's been super important. We wouldn't be in this position without Taiwo Awoniyi. We wouldn't be in this league without Taiwo Awoniyi. That last 6 or 7 goals he scored in the first season back were the deciding moments for this football club in its history going forward. But he's too injury prone, and I don't think that on the ball he has the same quality to hold up and play off like Chris Wood does. He's a bit more of a sort of play off the shoulder sort of player, which is okay, but he's not available enough. Jota Silva, he's someone that Forest could, use as the striker, but off the bench he offers something better, and also he's prone to a yellow card, so there is that problem as well. So, and also at the moment he wasn't even in the squad for the last game, so I'm not quite sure what his situation is. Ola Reina being out hasn't really helped, of course. That's a massive loss for Forest. Callum Hudson-Odoi, he's been in and out of the team. Anthony Elanga, he's kind of been playing limited minutes here and there. So overall, the injuries haven't really come at the right time. But I think Forest have dealt with it fairly well. Of course, The losses weren't great. The loss to Aston Villa was a bit unlucky. The loss to Everton was poor. But that being said, Forest can come back. They've rested a few players ready for Wembley as well at half-time. When they beat Spurs, of course, resting Elanga. So if they get through Wembley okay, relatively without any sort of major fitness problems, I think they'll be okay. But in terms of injuries, Forest sort of coming round now and certainly looking a bit stronger than they did just a couple of weeks ago. So we've talked tactical, we've talked injuries, we've kind of talked a bit about the other runs of other teams. Now, of course, I still think this is going to be the deciding factor, how the other teams do. Because the big thing I always say about Forest is that people do worry a little bit too much about what the other teams are doing. A lot of the time when we say, we're not in this position we wanted to be, it's because we've not won a game or we've not played as well as we should have, i.e. Everton at home. If we'd beaten Everton at home or got a draw, we wouldn't have to worry too much, especially like last night at the time of recording, about how the Man City v Aston Villa result went. But because Aston Villa, the kind of rift between Aston Villa and where we are at the moment is now opening up a tiny bit, very, very small, that could be massive. If Aston Villa do have these inconsistencies that they had against Man City, i.e. not really playing a proper right-back, which was really strange, and pushing Disasi out wide, then perhaps Aston Villa could drop a couple more points. And if they do, that gives Forest more of an opportunity and more of a cushion to stay where they are. Newcastle, they're inconsistent. I like Newcastle as a project, and I think Eddie Howe's a great manager, and of course he's not very well, so it's a different sort of dynamic at the moment at the club. But they are inconsistent. They've had a lot of problems with going on a really great run and then just completely dipping off. Big players not really turning up. So Newcastle potentially could be one that kind of offer Forest an olive branch in the terms of their inconsistency could help us. As for Man City, you never know what's going to come with them. At the moment, you don't know who's going to be available for selection. And the game on Sunday at Wembley will be really, really interesting. But we need to get back to the bigger picture. Do I think Forest will get to the UCL or the Champions League? 100%. Why do I think Forest will get to the Champions League? How do I think Forest will get to the Champions League? And what does Champions League football actually look like for Nottingham Forest? I still can't believe we're saying this, but what does it look like? The answer is yes. I think Forest are going to get Champions League football, and perhaps you're going to clip this and I'm going to look like an idiot. That's fine with me. I don't mind it. But for so long, I've kind of batted away the idea of Forest getting Europe. When it was like Christmas time, people were saying, we're on a European push. I'm like, come on. We know how it gets in the business end of the season, which we are now 100% in. We've only got, 4 or 5 games left. But I actually think that Forest are going to get Champions League football because of the mentality that they've got. That goal line clearance from Harry Toffolo, the saves from Matt Sels, everything. Even when your back's against the wall, they still get on with it and put a shift in. And I love that. Even at times when that lead has been so narrow, Forest have still held on. Last season they wouldn't have done that. The season before they definitely wouldn't have done that. And that's what separates us. And the Champions League for me is a huge achievement. And if Forest do get it like I think they will, then the sky is the limit going forward. Now, playing Champions League football is difficult. Forest will need to recruit really well this summer. I've already said a few names, and this is controversial, so
here we go.
Say what you want in the comments, but I think that Liam Delap would be a really good... I'd like to see Liam Delap at Forest. I think that for Chris Wood, he'd be a natural replacement. Hear me out. Rasmus Højlund. I actually think that if Man United were willing to sell, like some reports are saying today, they're willing to sell him for 30 million. If that was the case, a loan with an obligation to buy, potentially just a permanent purchase straight out. What do you think about that? Let me know. But Liam Delap and Rasmus Højlund would be 2 strikers that I'd be looking at to not replace Chris Wood, but to sort of back him up and compete with him for first team football. So, in fact, that brings me on to the wider point. Where do Forest need to strengthen? Who could they bring in? And how much depth do they actually need for Champions League football? Yeah, okay, we definitely don't need just 3 signings. We do need a bit more. I think that Forest are not only going to need a new striker, they're going to need potentially another winger, at least. I think that I'm not sure Ramon Sosa is really going to kind of cut it at the level that we're going to be playing at. That being said, has he been given a chance? That's also another debate. But for me, he goes out on loan or Forest sell him, or potentially Olympiacos in the summer. Now, another position I think that Forest need to strengthen is that defensive midfield position. Danilo, of course, I think he'll come back a new player in the summer. He broke his ankle last year, and he's kind of struggled since. But that being said, he did okay against Spurs. But I still think we need someone who can anchor that midfield a little bit. Ryan Yates, brilliant. Nicholas Dominguez, also brilliant. I do think there's probably a shout for Forest not making a call to go and get a new midfielder. But if it was me, I'd be looking at potentially someone who I'd look at, other than Douglas Luiz, who I do rate, but I do feel is a bit more of an 8, is that of Zambo Anguissa, who plays for Napoli. He's out of contract in the summer. Could be high wages, but he's got good tackling stats, good aerial. And if he can get up to speed, he could be the sort of the midfielder that Forest could add and could need going into Champions League football. Lots of experience there. I do think that Forest could do with maybe a couple of fullbacks, if not one that's versatile. I don't know whether Forest are going to sign Moreno on a permanent deal, but Olarena, he's out of contract and we don't know what the contract situation is going to be. And regardless if he stays, you need someone to cover him. I still think that Moreira is a little bit raw, perhaps could do with a loan or a bit more under 21s football, but new fullbacks, definitely. I think centre-back wise, we should be okay. Perhaps a reinforcement could be brought in with Willy Bolly leaving at the end of his contract, and also Tyler Binden probably going out on loan. So striker, winger, couple of fullbacks, and a new midfielder. I think that could be the move that Forest, or that could be the moves that Forest make. Perhaps even another goalkeeper, but I'm not sure whether that'd happen. It'd be a bit harsh on Matt Sells. So if we're going to get Champions League, I think they're where we need to strengthen. And to be fair, we need to strengthen there anyway. And then potentially after that, you could add in other positions as well, just for extra depth. But the Champions League requires super big depth. It requires a lot of players. And it is going to make Forest kind of think about how they're going to recruit this summer. They need to be really shrewd. They need to obviously take care of their situation with PSR and overall prepare for what will be a really intense campaign. Lots of games in 3 days, lots of football, lots of travelling. It's going to be a big logistical difference to what they're dealing with now. So finally then, with all of these kind of things taken into consideration, depth, the travel, the logistics, of course comes a big financial cost. Now Forest, if they get Champions League football, get a huge financial package which will no doubt support them. And of course the higher league finish already has its own extra merits as well, compared to when they were battling off relegation against Burnley at the end of the season just a year ago. So of course with that, Forest will be able to sign better players. I'm still not sure that I'd be in the camp of going out and spending £60 million on someone like Cunha. As I mentioned, Højlund and Delap probably my preferred choices for striker options, because that sort of £20 to £30 million range I think is the sweet spot for the players and the amount of players that we need. But that being said, the recruitment team I think should absolutely be trusted. Ross Wilson did some great work getting players at a real cut price. Milenkovic for 16 million, Murillo for 11 million, the likes of Hudson-Odoi for just 5 million, Elanga for 15. It goes on. So I fully trust the recruitment team to put in a real shift in getting some good players in preparation for Europe, because I would say that it would take something really huge to not get European football. Now I know that the first thing you're going to think is Stoke, 6-goal swing, okay, we get it, but don't think about that. This is a different time. Forest are going to get Europe, and I do believe they're going to get Champions League, and I've given the reasons why. I think tactically they can kill teams on the break. I think mentality-wise, they're one of the best in the Prem. And despite recent injuries, I'd also say our injury record has been really impressive. So we've got a lot of advantages. I think Forest will get the Champions League. Let me know what you think down below. It's good to be back doing YouTube videos. I will be doing some more creative videos. But at the moment, currently, just had a bit of surgery. So I'm in recovery and doing some videos in the meantime while I've got a bit of free time. So Forest will get Champions League, I do believe. That's my prediction. Let me know what you think. Can they? If you think so, why can they? If you don't think so, let me know down below, and I might even do a follow-up video after that. In the meantime, take care, and hopefully I'll be speaking to you as Forest have beaten Man City at Wembley and off to the final. But we'll have to wait and see. Take care, subscribe, see you soon.